Hello and welcome to episode 22 of Sinews of War. In the previous episode, Greece declared war on us as an ally of the Ottoman Empire, but luckily they didn't have any attacks planned or really any forces to make an attack. In order to react to this, I decided that Cavalry and Naval, who were going to attack Morocco, were instead going to bypass them and come to attack Greece instead. Meanwhile, nearby, the forces of Voss and Gaydon were starting an attack on Istanbul, hoping to have a decisive battle against the massive Ottoman army defending it. Unfortunately, the battle had to be called off when performance issues caused the frame rate to drop to like 2 per second, and it was almost impossible to control the game. So, while withdrawing, I decided to use my artillery to just pound the Ottoman army since they were just standing inside the fort. So we did do a fair amount of damage to them in this battle without really losing any of our own forces. But that also had to be cut short because my withdrawing forces decided to go back into battle without orders and were starting to get themselves killed. So overall, a bit of a bodged attack. I feel quite at ease here actually, the company charter be damned. There's something refreshing about the Mediterranean. Not sure if it's the air or just not having the Director General Odovics writing every 3 days with new recommendations on how I should treat my men. Anyway, even if the stadholders wish to punish me for breaking contract, I have a few factors of mitigation that will see me through. Firstly, I will deliver them a peaceful and unified Greece under their flag. Almost seems strange to conquer for our people, not the company. I wonder what the practical difference will turn out to be. Secondly, I've heard much of the antics the stadholders will allow if it gains them wealth or power. Their corruption is the source of the famous Mr. Voss's success, no doubt. So perhaps they will simply see me in the same spirit. Thirdly, of course, they may not feel so callous as to attack the honor of an old man. Under their regime, I'd be retired long ago, so maybe they'll be grateful for my long service to their interests. Perhaps they'll tell the company to be grateful as well. That would be nice. But it bothers me not what affairs the company partakes in, for in truth, I never intend to return there. A rogue I have become, and a rogue I shall stay. I know not how many years I have left, but it is surely few, and I'll be damned if I spend them wasting away in colonies ruled by utter contempt for humanity. I think I would rather return to my old home in Amsterdam, see how the years have treated it. I hope that both God and the Greek shot will grant me enough time for that at least. So yes, Nassau is going to be sailing in with the help of Calenber's fleet to Athens, where we can use the docks in order to land and keep all of our movement points, so we can actually move out and start doing things against the Greeks right away. The Greeks don't have a particularly powerful army, but it does mean we're going to be safe in Athens now that we have a full stack to defend it. It's possible they could have overcome the garrison at Athens currently. So the Greeks currently have half a stack of troops plus half a stack of garrison, meaning they will have a full stack if we attack them, but I thought it would be enough to use Nassau's force to do this. You can see the balance of power is about even, the enemy having more numbers but inferior troop quality, and I can reinforce with extra troops that I've been recruiting at Athens, so we can put more men into Nassau's army and have a backup unit outside, and I can keep recruiting more troops because I'm just going to siege them out for one turn to see if they sally, because we don't want to have to attack that settlement because it has star forts, very difficult to assault. Now Calenber, since he's here, can also make himself useful by coming and smashing this Turkish fleet that was stopping me from blockading them from moving from Anatolia into Europe. So I'm going to throw down a cheeky save because we don't trust the auto-resolve of naval battles, but actually it was fine. We had a much bigger fleet and a more powerful one. And we even managed to capture one of their ships, which is very nice. So that clears that up, and that's going to allow us to continue that blockade, which should stop them reinforcing Istanbul if we're lucky. Now jumping over to Spain, I have prepared an army to try and face off against the Moroccans, and I'm going to hire a new general to help that army. We get this guy, Johan Bogadus. He's nothing particularly special, with no traits and 3 command stars, so he is as generic as you get, but hopefully he will gain some skills as we go on. So the Moroccans have basically a full stack at Gibraltar and some reinforcements over in Morocco itself, but I'm going to start the attack right now. I do have more space in my army, but I'm going to keep recruiting in order to fill it up later. So as I come into siege, the enemy have the advantage. That's because their forces in Morocco actually reinforce if I make a siege assault on Gibraltar, but if I just sit here and wait for them to sally, those forces won't get involved, so it will be a more balanced engagement. I am, though, as I mentioned, going to throw in some more forces to the recruitment at Madrid so that next turn I can bring those in. But we don't have time because they actually sally right away. So as you can see here, now a more balanced engagement as the Moroccan reinforcements from across the strait don't get involved. It's going to be a more simple battle. The enemy bringing over double our numbers, but because of their inferior ranged quality, we have an even chance. The enemy, though, having really good melee troops, including some heavy halberdiers and these Richte warriors, who are a very serious looking sword unit. So by the looks of things, we need to avoid melee at all costs. The map is actually the crazy map we fought on before, where there's a giant cliff right in front of my deployment zone. So the enemy are going to be scrambling about on these low grounds to try and come up these cliffs to where I've deployed. Some of them have deployed on top of the cliff already, so we're going to see some early attacks from them coming along that cliffside route. And we are just going to do exactly the same thing we did when Voss was defending this battlefield, where we divide the army into two halves, one defending from that cliffside approach and one defending the forests on the other side. My guns are in the middle, and these guns have experienced a little bit of a problem with this tree. I think they fired into it and killed some of their own crew with the shrapnel, so that wasn't particularly helpful from them. But anyway, yes, there's the other side just forming up on this forested hill to stop the enemy advancing at me from the west. So back on the east side, the enemy started their attack with these desert warriors, which unfortunately outranged my troops, which I didn't realise. So they're able to just volley against me, and they can also fire through their own unit, meaning they have really high firepower, and we lose loads of men in the first volley. So we need to charge forwards and start trying to get some fire by rank back on them to bring them down. They bring up these light infantry, these nomads as well, also long range units, so I need to keep advancing to make sure we're in range. I had cavalry hidden on the next door hill, so we can bring those out onto the enemy's flank, ready to make an attack. But before I attacked, I wanted to give them at least one cycle of the fire by rank to soften them up, so we're going to do just that. Our unit's probably actually having less firepower than the enemy's because we can't all fire, and we can't extend the line long enough to make it be exactly 3 men deep because the enemy's position is so small. But anyway, my cavalry now in position to make an attack, the enemy getting up another volley just before we get them into melee, unfortunately. So we're going to engage in that melee, those cavalry forgetting to go in, but we're going to order them in a second. The desert warriors are actually okay in melee. They're a pretty good all-round unit, okay at range and okay in melee. So the cav aren't going to have an amazing time hacking through them, but the sheer numbers of cav I have should mean we can take them out. And of course it's going to free up all my line infantry to go and focus on those African nomads further along, so we should defeat them as well. And bringing in a reserve unit of cavalry that I also had hidden back there just to make sure we can win that cav engagement. And the infantry see the enemy off, they start retreating back up the hill after taking losses, but the enemy have reinforcements on the way, lots of infantry, but ahead of them are coming some scout cavalry, gun cav, who stop and just blast into that melee with my cav in it, killing both sides. So it seems to make the enemy rout, so that's something, but we lost cav as well. An interesting situation where I don't really want to pursue that routing unit because I don't want to go up and get shot by the scouts without support from the infantry. So I'm going to try and fall back and draw them to attack my infantry line. These very trees saw the great battle here, the decisive engagement against the brutal Spanish. Ah, to know the stories these trees could tell! Such tales of valour would doubtless be recounted by their noble selves until time did rend them from the ground they were so proud to grow on. And now I find myself on centre stage, asked to perform that greatest of plays, the victory to shame all victories. And what a dance I have planned for the audience, the leafy watchmen who hover above a field soon to be dyed with justly spilt blood. Let them come, I say, let them come. Let them step and weave among our loyal troops. Let the symphony of fiery powder ring out. Let the greatest show on earth run aground to a standing ovation. Running counter to my plan to fight this enemy cavalry at range is the fact that my men won't fire by rank at them. I think someone pointed out the last time we fought on this battlefield that there's actually a glitch. You can't use fire by rank against cavalry for some unknown reason. The unit on the end there just not even firing at all. I'm not sure why that is. But anyway, the enemy actually decided they didn't want to fight at range anyway. They were just going to charge with their gun cav. I managed to form squares with the affected units at the last moment, so we're going to get that bonus against cavalry, which should help out. But they are still going to break inside the squares pretty easily. But the squares are going to hold on, fortunately for me. We're not going to lose our formation. So it's now just a deadly melee fight. Hopefully we can hold that unit of cav off. It's sort of annoying because it means those two units aren't firing. So the enemy's infantry coming down are going to have a bit of an easier time. They've got camel gunners as well now coming in to blast at my cav. I'm going to keep trying to fall back to form some sort of line battling situation. I don't want to have to just charge up the hill into melee against everything, because I think both sides would take extreme losses, and I want to come away with something still alive. So meanwhile, on the western side of the battlefield, the enemy starting to approach, coming up the hill and leading their attack with their elite melee infantry. There's the Ouija warriors. They look pretty damn serious with their masks, sword and shields, and they're backing up those gigantic halberdiers who surely are going to outclass my men in melee, but while they're still at range, we're going to have a nice advantage just blasting away at them. So over here, those scout cavalry now very low on troops. They're taking heavy damage trying to fight with the square, and we're actually doing okay against them, so that was a favourable engagement in the end. I'm trying to start a line battle with these enemy musketeers who are coming down in front of the camel gunners and absorbing some friendly fire for me, so very nice. But the main action's about to start here on the west as the enemy just charge my line. They're going to do their best to put fire onto the enemy, but their morale is too high. The usual trick of making them rout before they can finish their charge doesn't even nearly work, and now they're just going to pile into my lines with all of these troops, and you can see the Dutch lines basically disappear. They rampage right through them, blasting out the other side in many cases, so that is not good at all. We're going to start taking huge losses trying to hold the enemy at this position, and if we try and fall back, we're just going to take even more. So really, we're just committing into a grind all along the line. Basically my entire line infantry position here engaged in melee, so no shots firing anymore, as you can hear. It's just a straight up battle. The enemy taking pretty heavy losses as well. My men aren't all that bad in melee thanks to all their upgrades, but the enemy's still going to be superior, so it's going to be a pretty deadly grind. We need the enemy to rout to have a real chance of taking them out. I've got 2 reserve units now coming around to sit on the flank of that fight, possibly going to fight into the enemy to lower their morale. That will give us a slight chance of winning there. On the other side, everything just descended into a big brawl, as I was trying to avoid, but perhaps it's for the best, because at least it means things go quicker. I need these men to get out of there to go and reinforce the other side of the battlefield. You can see the huge pile of bodies covering this hillside in the aftermath of that battle, just between all the units on this side. Only those scouts survived, and my cav are going to go chase them down before they return to fight on this side of the battlefield. So my reserve cav have now ploughed in to fight where the line infantry have already disappeared. You can see around them, no line infantry from my side left, it's just the enemy's melee units. So my cav are basically holding them in position with a huge and messy melee, where we're probably not going to do all that well, especially as the enemy has these camel warriors who have come in to fight with my cav as well. You can see how they tower over them. It looks a bit silly really how tall they are compared to the cav. But yes, my line basically gone at this stage, the enemy rampaging around, and these cav are the only thing stopping them from just doing whatever they want by keeping them in melee. There's the last survivors of those line infantry regiments escaping. We still have those guys on the flank, but pretty soon they're going to get engaged as well. You can see we just have nothing here in the centre but the cav, and the cav are losing men rapidly. They're already 2/3 defeated, especially fighting against those halberdiers. You don't imagine they're going to do all that well, so they're really just a sacrifice to distract the enemy at this stage. But now they've got more and more units coming in up the hill, so they were able to engage my flanking force in melee as well. These desert warriors, not all that powerful, but still going to do quite well. That guy actually ran all the way down the hill and smashed his head on a tree, so a little bit embarrassing for him. He really messed up that charge, but hopefully he can sneak back into the fight and his comrades won't notice. Unfortunately, my cavalry reserve moving up to support that position might mean he doesn't make it back alive, but the enemy really are just pouring everything in. Armed populace coming in with swords now to join the melee, and the desert warriors just going to be grinding against the line infantry. I think in terms of melee stats, we're probably about even with them, so it's going to be an attrition heavy battle, both sides taking loads of losses. Now they almost broke through the centre to the position of my guns, but the men coming back from the other side of the field arrived just in time to drive the enemy back at the last moment. Those camels easily routed by this attack. So we are going to be able to put our men right back into our central position there and retake the ground we've lost to the enemy with these half-dead units, and the enemy routing away there going to give us a few sneaky kills as we chase them, so that's very nice. Now I sent a unit of cav to attack a unit of nomads who were flanking around the main battle, and the enemy general actually came in to fight there, and that was quite useful for me because the enemy's general unit won't do very well against my cavalry, so that's a nice chance for us to bring him down, while the main melee, well, as you can see, it's just an enormous chaotic mess with neither side gaining a clear advantage. The enemy's general does die though, so that's going to give us a morale advantage. We don't have to kill as many of the enemy to get them to leave. The last of their forces now coming in. They were coming in a big column up the hill, so basically it was one unit at a time ploughing into the fight, but now they're all into the fight. I've actually still got one reserve unit left back here that's just firing into the melee indiscriminately. I've got my general as well, not going to use him right now because he's going to be very vulnerable. And the cavalry who have now returned from chasing those scouts are going to be usable, so we're going to just plow them in. As my infantry get defeated, I really had no choice but to just attack with all the cavalry, commit everything into this huge chaotic blob, and hope that the enemy rout now that their morale must be low. I was being helped out by the fact the enemy couldn't reinforce properly thanks to my artillery, who were just pounding at the men who kept trying to come back into the melee and making them rout again thanks to the shock of being hit by artillery. So that kept a couple of hundred of enemy troops out of that battle. So very nice from the artillery, who are currently completely exposed, just fighting in the open there. So the enemy come in with those nomads, give a nice volley of friendly fire into the back of the melee, and that seems to rout those desert warriors. And now my cavalry start to gain some momentum, and the few surviving line infantry are going to push forwards as well. We can start cutting down those warriors as they go, going to plow into the nomads who join the melee. But now, with all of our units actually having a numerical advantage locally thanks to the enemy routes, we should be able to grind through them and continue on. So we're just going to push this route and not let the enemy reform at all here, and massive downhill charge into some more nomads at the bottom of the hill. A nice easy set of kills for my cavalry. So finally, after a gigantic grind, it seems like we've managed to win, probably just thanks to our superior discipline. As you can see here, both sides took enormous casualties when it just so happened that the enemy routed and we didn't, and as a result we were able to gain the victory there. You can see the massive slaughtering ground on the floor. So basically the entire enemy army destroyed and our entire army destroyed. You can see here in the stats that many of our units did a lot of damage, especially the cavalry, but took a lot of damage themselves. The line infantry mostly getting at least 1 or 2 kills for every man they lost, so a good performance from them. Overall, an extremely Pyrrhic victory. It is with great joy that we report the destruction of the Grand Army of Morocco. A large engagement at the Voss escarpment was the decisive hour. Although outnumbered by more than double, your loyal General Johann Bogardus was able to kill or capture the vast majority of the enemy divisions. He regrets to report, though, that in the process of this great deed he saw casualties on his own side amount to 8 in 10 men, a cost that leaves him in need of further support should the noble gentleman allow it. He reminds all that the men lost were, in large part, defectors from defeated Spain, recruited with unusual haste in order to check the Moroccans. Therefore, he recommends that no strong pity be raised for their loss. At the beginning of the next turn, we learn that unfortunately General Nassau has died of natural causes. He was extremely old, so I'm actually surprised he lived this far. But the inevitable has finally happened. We have lost Nassau, meaning his army here is now without leadership. I am, though, able to promote a general, so we get a new officer to replace him, this guy Voorhees, who is completely unremarkable, as you can see, just like Bogardus. Basically no traits, no particular abilities that make him good as a general. He is just a placeholder who will now lead the force to give it slightly enhanced abilities. We can also move over some reinforcements from Athens to slightly bolster our defense against the Greeks if they sally out there. But still, a huge shame to lose Nassau, probably our best general. Possibly Voss was better than Nassau in terms of raw ability, but clearly Nassau was responsible for our massive gains in America. So a historic loss, but we need to move on, and the first thing we're going to do is restart our siege of Istanbul. You can see it's almost actually a balanced engagement with just one of the armies led by Voss there. So when Gaiden moves up with the support army, we're actually going to have a pretty powerful position against the Ottomans here. It's almost an auto-resolve situation, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to take the losses from that. We want to take this as easily as possible, because we might need to just move on right away and press against further Ottoman territories to the east. So right now I'm just going to hold them at siege and see what they do. It's possible they'll sally, and even if they don't, they're going to be taking losses every turn, and I don't really want to have to assault and get into another glitch situation like last time. Jumping back over to Gibraltar, you can see that both sides are really weak after that battle we just saw, and I'm unable to actually make an attack. I thought I might sneakily be able to take Gibraltar right now, but because of those reinforcements coming over from Morocco, the enemy actually have an advantage, so we're going to have to just maintain the siege. I'm going to spend an enormous amount of money to start retraining the army. It still has plenty of its regiments left in shape, so I can get a lot of the troops back like that, and I can also reinforce with extra regiments that I recruited at Madrid, and they can come down this very turn, in fact, to join the siege. So that's going to power us up a little bit, and basically mean we'll just have to starve of the Moroccans out of Gibraltar since we don't really have the power to safely assault them. So moving on, the British seem to be moving a fleet there through the Mediterranean. It'll be interesting to see where that's going. And the Spanish make a much more reasonable peace deal than usual. For some reason, they're now a protectorate of Georgia. So that ruins my plan of trying to make them my protectorate. But I thought, well, let's just see if they give it a peace if I just ask for a random amount of money. And they actually accepted it, which I didn't really expect. I probably should have asked for more money. So there we go. I've got 6,000 and we're now at peace with Spain. Not that that makes any difference since they were stuck on an island and we weren't really doing any hostile actions against them anyway. So now the Moroccans in Gibraltar actually sally out again, and you can see why on the balance bar they even have a slight advantage just because we lost so much in that previous battle that their survivors are actually a match for our surviving force even after it's been reinforced from Madrid. So we now have to do a very quick battle. It was actually pretty easy. The enemy didn't have any long range capabilities and I had lots of artillery left. A very large proportion of my army was in its artillery power. So we just smashed the enemy from atop the cliffside to begin the battle and killed a lot of their troops even before they actually bothered to come up and fight us. When they did arrive up at the top, it was relatively easy to surround them with my full strength regiments and just blast at them. The enemy had no general and after being under artillery fire and taking those losses had low morale, so it didn't take very much to actually make them leave just by firing at them. Although I noticed that during this period of firing we weren't really killing any enemies. I think having the little slopes and the trees around means that basically none of these men are actually hitting their targets. So both sides just blasting at each other doing nothing basically. It's all about morale shocks. Now one unfortunate event that occurred was I noticed this set of guns had been completely destroyed by something, and I realised it's because I had told them to move further down the cliffs here on the east side of the map, and they actually walked in front of this other set of guns who just kept firing indiscriminately and blasted our own sets of guns apart in the process. So that wasn't very kind of them, but anyway, it's not going to have any major effect on the battle. You can see the enemy infantry just routing there. I'm going to chase them down with my cav to make sure that we'll definitely take Gibraltar after this. Now you might have noticed that Bogardus, our general, actually isn't present on the battlefield for some reason right now, so I'll have to see what's going on with that. That's a little bit worrying, but at least we have defeated the Moroccans once again. We should be able to push them back out of the Iberian Peninsula after this win. I remember when I first sailed from Amsterdam with him 14 years ago. I thought that I had the worst luck, being given a favourite of the nobility to act as my right hand, some novice with a paid-for commission that would prove to be the Second West India Company's downfall. How fortunate we all are that this assessment was too hasty. Now we remember Hendrik as the man who conquered the Americas, a man upon whom the success of our company is entirely founded. I and many others disagreed with his methods regularly, and even in his final acts he shunned the company for his own reasons, and yet none can disagree with the quality of the results he delivered when the day was done. Nassau was perhaps a misunderstood hero. Here are the results of that battle. You can see we lost pretty much nothing, the enemy losing most of their remaining forces, and that allows us to actually take Gibraltar right away, so that's nice. We are going to start the next turn with it under control, but we also get some bad news. It turns out that Bogardus was in fact assassinated. We did spot a Moroccan rake hanging around a couple of turns ago, so he's probably still just outside Gibraltar committing these acts, so that's very unfortunate. His loss isn't especially important because he had no particular qualities as a general, and I can literally just replace him with another one. So we get a new general called Courtland, and actually this guy is better than Bogardus was. We've got soldier from birth as one of his traits, and that gives him extra command star right from the beginning, and he's a fair bit younger. So this guy has much more potential, I think, so we'll have to see where his campaigns take him. We are of course going to probably just prepare to go and attack Morocco itself right across the strait. They only have a few units in there, a big garrison though, so I'm going to need to replenish this army, which should be done next turn. Then I'll have a full stack to play with and we should be able to do some damage. Now I decided to send Cavalry and the West India Company fleet to go and have a look around the Eastern Mediterranean to basically scout out what the Ottomans were doing and destroy any ports we came across. And it sort of turns out the Ottomans aren't really doing anything, and in fact their ports are already destroyed in some cases. They have no garrisons in any of the big cities we're coming across. So at least we're detecting here a potential weakness. If we just invaded, say, Egypt, that might take the Ottomans entirely by surprise and we could very rapidly deny them some of their major territories. Here's their army, if you can call it an army. It's the classic AI Ottoman glitch. They've gone absolutely insane and just posted single regiments all over their territory, and I believe that's the primary reason that it takes 15 to 30 minutes for them to process each of their turns, because they're trying to decide what to do with each regiment individually. So very annoying. Really, it's giving me an impetus to just try and wipe out the Ottomans entirely so I don't have to deal with that glitch. It would make the series easier to film, that's for sure. But anyway, before any of that, I decided to end another turn with both of my sieges still going, and the Greeks decide to sally out. They have a lot of infantry, but it's not as good as my infantry, so I'm feeling relatively confident even though the balance bar says this is an even fight. Now, this was a relatively long battle, so we can't see it all right now, but I am going to show you something interesting that happened in the opening of this battle. You can see my initial formation was to set up trenches along the corner of the map, trying to steer clear of the fort because they do have their mortars, and with my artillery on a hill behind, not able to fire into the fort, but right now I'm just firing at the corner of this very impressive star fort they've got here. A nice construction, and looking inside we can see the mortar team running off. We know exactly what they're going to be doing. They've got the old mortar madness, so they'll be coming out to have a little fun with our front line, but they actually had some artillery pieces set up that could hit us from the inside of their fort with their superior range, so that was unfortunate. It meant I had to decide whether I was going to just try and tank it and allow the trenches to take some of the damage from that artillery fire, or run away and leave the trenches where they were and have a line further back. I ended up going for the line further back and planned to just advance back to the trenches once the enemy's main attack began, but their mortar team was coming in first, of course, and I ordered these natives to go and kill the mortar team, but unfortunately they just stood in the trenches and didn't fire. And that actually means the mortar team does make it into melee, and I'm frantically telling all the units behind to not fire at will because they really want to just fire into that melee. The same thing for these mounted gunners. So we lose a few men to their overzealous firing at our own troops, but now the mounted gunners can draw their axes and come in to finish off that mortar team, who probably would have lost anyway just fighting the auxiliaries there. But the interesting thing about that melee is that now we've won it, we are actually going to see we've taken some losses, and this is probably the first time, and hopefully the last time, that the crazy mortar charge tactic will actually produce any results. You can see we lost almost 30 men on those native auxiliaries, and the enemy probably lost fewer. I think there's only about 24 men in a mortar team. So in an incredible twist, the Greeks have pulled out a surprise tactic and managed to actually do something useful by sacrificing their mortar team, unlike all of the other powers who tried the same tactic. We'll see if they have any other tricks next time. The Ottoman military administration was nearly non-existent after the loss of their key officers to the Dutch and Polish advances. They desperately levied more troops from across their large empire and ordered them to make the long march east to gather at staging posts in Anatolia. However, most of these new companies were without any professional leadership, meaning that they struggled to maintain the discipline to make the journey. Soon there were straggling Ottoman detachments all over the empire, all out of contact with their overall commanders, and many simply unable to navigate through unfamiliar lands to find the various bases they had been ordered to. This highly dispersed force could do nothing but drain resources, hindering the Ottomans yet further. Thanks for watching. We'll see the rest of that battle and other key battles in Europe in the next episode of Sinews of War.